Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We're doing this series, which is supposed to be very interactive. So the basic theme here is that we're going to pick a very simple video, a short video, about 20 minutes video. And the criteria for the video is that it has to be a life-changing video. It has to have an idea which, if you learn and integrate, can change your life. Of course, you have to change your life. So, it's like the horse, you can take, but that has to be water. So we'll just make sure that there is water in the video. Okay, and then what you do with it is yours. And then you can watch other horses or what they see, what they can do with the water. So what we're going to do is, the format is everybody gets to talk about, everybody who has watched the video gets to talk about the video, about what they got from it. This video today is about neuroplasticity. And at the end of the video, she asks a really important question. She says, everybody's brain has this neuroplasticity. Your brain has the neuroplasticity. But the way in which brains change is different from person to person. So you have to figure out, how are you going to leverage the neuroplasticity of your brain? So that is the big question that you have to be focused on throughout, okay? And we're going to be doing either breakout rooms or kind of general discussion here, depending on the flow of the conversation. This is designed to be extremely interactive, all right? So please speak up, give your thoughts. You can start by putting, have you watched the video or a part of it? If you watch a part of the video, just say yes in the chat. So we're going to start with Joe is going to give a short introduction, and then anybody who wants to share or what they got from the video can go ahead and share by typing in an exclamation mark in chat. Joe.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us here this evening. Welcome to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight's discussion will be on neuroplasticity, as Shrikant has already mentioned. The TED Talk was given by Dr. Lara Boyd, who is the director of Brain Behaviour Lab at the University of British Columbia. Now, she opens up the discussion speaking about how neuroscience has progressed over the past 30 years, primarily because of new technologies like fMRIs or MRIs. And one of those discoveries is neuroplasticity, which is the ability for the brain to reorganize itself. Specifically, she was focused on adults, where we had previously believed that only people, our brains were only essentially able to be changed up till around high school and through puberty. Now, she outlines three key areas when it comes to neuroplasticity. The first one's chemical, the second one's structural plasticity, and the third one is functional plasticity. So the first one, chemical, we'll just cover really briefly. The brain functions by transmitting chemicals between brain cells, and these are called neurons. And we have three sets of different neurons. We have sensory neurons, which carry information from our senses to the brain, which essentially like our eyes, our hearing, our sight, our smell. And then we have motor neurons, which control voluntary muscle activity, such as speaking, walking, and talking. And then we have interneurons. And these are centralized nodes that enable the sensory and motor neurons communicate with the central nervous system. So this is important because the activity with these types of neurons impact our short-term memory. Now, an example would be, I think, one she provided, where you're playing an instrument one day and you feel like you have a rhythm, but if you go back the next week, you don't necessarily, you have to relearn what you did, and you don't necessarily, it's not a habit yet per se. So, which brings me to the next example, which is structural plasticity. This demonstrates the brain's ability to actually change its physical structure. And this is a little bit more difficult to achieve and needs a little bit more time because, and there are a number of ways that we will discuss that how this can be done. But this is really important because this impacts our long-term memory, and it allows us to do, it can literally change the way we actually function with our motor skills and our sensory skills as well. The last one is functional plasticity, which is the ability to move even from one area to the brain to another area of the brain. Specifically, if an area of the brain has been damaged, you can start to move to retrain your brain to use neurons in a different section of the brain. And basically, if you have an injury or a stroke, or if you have long-term depression in certain cases that have shown to impact the brain in a negative way, the brain can then adapt. But you really do have to put in a lot of work in order to make that happen. But one of the reasons functional plasticity is so important is because the more you exercise your brain, the more connected it becomes. So it doesn't necessarily it's not even necessarily something that you'd be recovering from injury. We can all do this. Now, why is neuroplasticity so important? It's because we can essentially influence the development of our brain. By challenging our minds and our bodies, we can actually change the way we function. Now, the specific question that Dr. Boyd is really interested in is what limits and facilitates neuroplasticity, because she actually focuses on stroke people that have had strokes, and has applied different types of methodologies in order to address people that had strokes. And she believes the findings that she has come across can be applied in a wide variety of areas, not just to stroke patients. So she highlighted two areas in particular where she thought it was worth noting that where a lot of progress, she sees a lot of progress when it comes to neuroplasticity. The first has to do with the importance of behavior, and the second one has to do with developing a more personalized approach to learning. So one thing that facilitates neuroplasticity is, as I said, was behavior. There's various speech exercises, sensory and motor re-education exercises, eating, sleeping, exercise, developing good habits, and you can actually start to change the way your brain functions. And again, this is somewhat over the past 30 years, this was something that is new to the neuroscience community. That prior to this, they really believed that the brain was set, that this really couldn't be achieved. But one thing that she did find in her work was there was an extreme rate of variability in the people that she was treating. Some people got better much faster than others. So it's really hard to come up with a standard set of treatments when you have high variability in what in seeing how people heal. What works for one individual may not work for another individual. So what she did from there was actually interesting. She did something that we do here, some topical, where she looked at the way cancer patients were being treated, and specifically how personalized medicine was being used in that field, and developed a way to use biomarkers to develop specific treatments for individuals to heal from strokes and from other brain injuries. And this was to try and optimize their outcomes, essentially. And she felt the interesting part about this is that it had implications into other areas, not just people that have had strokes, but anybody that was learning. And that if we could start to understand, how to look at biomarkers or come up with personalized ways of training the brain, that essentially we can come up with much more effective interventions for ways to even educate children and to continue to maintain our minds into older age. So some of the ways that we'll explore some of these, that the way they can get, we can do this is that we can learn a new language, we can exercise, we can learn to play a new instrument, we can visit new cities, goes to the museums, things along those lines. That these are little things that actually help us in our brain development and keeping us more aware. But she also works with things like robotics and other things. But I'll leave it there for now as the just a brief overview.
Thank you, Joe. That was fantastic. So folks, I mean, this is an amazing topic, and it very much goes to the heart of what we do here. I like to learn, and so do most of the people who come here. And you kind of have to, I mean, there's several things that I find fascinating. One is the idea of kind of personalized style of learning. Now, that entire field of personalized medicine is going to develop. But before that, we have some feedback about when is it that we learn fastest, when is it that it is kind of plodding for us, when is it that it takes off, and all of that. You kind of have to, one of the things that you realize here is that each brain is different, and you have this magnificent thing in your possession. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? You can't, you can take the passive approach of saying, okay, these are my habits. This is just who I am. This is what I am. And I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Or you can say, okay, what do I want to do? And how do I do it? And how do I understand my brain, my unique brain, your unique personality, your unique brain, and to say, okay, how do you make the most of it? So it's a fantastic topic. And again, this series of meetups that we're doing, which are normally on Tuesdays, is all about interactivity, because we want to learn from each other. When people speak, if you listen closely, there is a chance that somebody is going to say something. Many people are going to say something, sometimes in an offhand way, which could be of tremendous help to you. So please, I would like to hear from you folks. What did you get from this video? What are your thoughts about neuroplasticity? Go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat. The rules remain same. To speak, you can raise your hand in Zoom or type exclamation mark in chat. That's rule number one. Rule number two, keep on topic. We're talking about this video and neuroplasticity. Number three, be brief. There's a lot of people who have lots of interesting things to say. So say what you want to say in a concise way. And number four, feel free to speak your mind, disagree with anybody on anything, and do so courteously. So we're going to start with Rochelle, followed by Laura. Give me just a second. Yes, go ahead, Rochelle. What did you think of the video? You need to unmute yourself. At this point, we're talking about, go ahead.
Unfortunately, I didn't see the video, but I plan to, as you mentioned. I've been having memory problems, and
Rochelle, let's do one thing. Let's give people who have had a chance to watch the video to talk first, and then we will open it up for everybody. Okay?
No, okay. I'm wondering what I could do about it using these methods. That's all.
Okay. I mean, that's, we are not, I mean, the thing is that we are not, we are not a medical organization. We are not very good at giving, we won't give advice to individual people, but let's start by hearing from people who have watched the video first. Laura, go ahead. Laura, you need to unmute yourself.
No, I just want to say, I mean, it's a fascinating set of topics, and it's really interesting. Also, given what our talk was the other day about on neurons, like to add this to that is really, I think, going to be an interesting topic if possible. because the idea of the way neurons move and the way it was talked about the other night, I think would be really interesting to examine. I'm also fascinated by the discussion about the ability to sort of mold your brain, it just fascinates me. I mean, on a personal level, as you know, I could use that. But aside from that, I mean, oh, Lucy, I'm sorry. The dog just came back and she wants her carrots. I have a dog that loves carrots and she'll take every opportunity to get some carrots. Sorry.
Tell about dogs.
Yeah, that's my dog.
Okay.
Now that's a dog that needs a brain. Yeah, so yeah, I think we're breaking some new ground. And actually, for me, honestly, this is a life-changing kind of moment, dealing with this kind of topic. So if you want, that's what we're supposed to have, 52
Wonderful.
ideas that'll blow our mind.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. All right, who'd like to go next? Anybody who has watched the video? Okay, let's see. Jyoti, go ahead.
I was impressed with the lecture this time. She definitely has a point that your behaviors, your thinking, your thoughts, and your good habits, you can change your habits, and they can actually change the structure of your brain. So if you have to change something, you have to practice. And with the practice, the part of the brain that's responsible, for example, your frontal lobe, that is your executive functioning lobe. So if you have some negative thoughts and you are converting them into positive thoughts, your frontal lobe will start commanding those thoughts to you. As a result, you will become a positive person. And similarly, with the people who have had dementia, their brain can actually be reconstituted. Their neurons, their axioms, and everything can be reconstituted. So having said that, I will just point out one thing. Years ago, monks used to do meditation. And they noticed, the MRI noticed that the monks, after doing years and years of meditation, their brain structure had completely altered. And not only their brain had altered, their offsprings, they were born with a brain that was preordained for meditation. So there is something to it that your thoughts and behaviors can bring about changes in you, and it depends on you. Your good habits, you can change your habits. You can get up in the morning, you can meditate, and you can find out what part of the day you are good at learning, what part of the day you are good with the motor skills, and this is up to you. And she's very right, it is up to you. So that's my take, basically.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jyoti. That was great. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead. And folks, go ahead. Don't be shy. Go ahead, and we would like to hear what you got to say. That's the best way of getting value out of it. First, it'll be people who have watched the video, and then we'll open it up for everybody. And then we're going to do a general discussion. Kevin, go ahead.
I usually got my kind view about our brain. You use it, you don't use it, going to rusty, slow down. Then on her end of video, she mentioned it could be good or bad. If you know, she didn't explain the bad part. Normally, I think it is a good part. Yeah, I'm not sure anyone have that.
Sure, we can bring that up as a question. So there'll be after a while we'll be taking all the questions and we'll be doing a lightning round. So please, can you please bring it up at that point again, Kevin?
Yeah, sounds good, Frank.
Thank you. All right, anybody else wants to share what they got from the video? Patricia.
Yes, hi. I just thank you for bringing the video to our attention. It's interesting. Lara Boyd is a physical therapist by profession, and I'm an occupational therapist. And she reminded me about what her basic studies are in is motor learning theory, which is something that we use in training or retraining specific skills, and just how important looking at how the person learns and where they're learning, the environment they're learning in, and whether they can apply that learning to other situations. So and how just basic exercise, aerobic exercise will help to helps to enhance our neurotrophic factors in the brain. So just basic exercise will promote your ability to learn and acquire skills, but the skills need to be done in context and they need to be practiced appropriately. Because Kevin, mentioned the possible negative effects, because what we're doing can have potential negative effects. And even practicing something, if you're repeatedly practicing something the wrong way, we have a statement that we say, practice makes perfect. That's what people think, but it also practice makes permanent. So if you are practicing something that's not very healthy or positive, it can stick too. So neuroplasticity is a wonderful thing, and it's a tool that we can use, but we need to be mindful of what we're practicing, how often we're practicing, and what the value is we're getting out of the practice.
Wow, that was fantastic, Patricia. So I want to comment on a couple of things that you and Jyoti brought up. So folks, go ahead and line up for your comments by putting an exclamation mark. So there's several points here. One is the point, I think of it in terms of feedback loops. You do something and that shapes you further. You can think of it in terms of kind of mind-body connection. Brain is not separated from the body. Brain is a part of the body, and it is the controlling mechanism of the body. So it is the movement of the body that is expressed, and that is you're training the brain by moving, actually by directing your action. So this kind of mind-body connection, somebody like a physical therapist can see it. The points about practice were fantastic, because in practice you're deliberately repeating something, and you have to make sure that those repetitions are something that are building repertoires that can build on themselves, rather than repertoires that are going to stop you from doing something. This is very much true in, for example, when you're learning music. If you keep doing things the wrong way, if you practice the wrong way, then that's going to limit what you can do. So there is definitely the point about good practice and bad practice is excellent. All right, anybody else wants to share? Anybody who has watched the video? Okay, let's go ahead and then open it up for anybody else who wants to either make a comment or ask a question. Donna, would you like to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I didn't watch the video, but I am familiar with neuroplasticity. And what I find interesting, it reminds me that it's similar to strength training a muscle, where you have to challenge the brain beyond its normal capacity, because the brain, just like a muscle, becomes used to the existing challenge, that when you take it out of its existing challenge, that's when you, I can't remember, it's been a while, it grows, I guess, or that you get that neuroplasticity, that it just new, again, it's been a while, new neurons grow in the brain because of it's tapping into new areas that it hasn't used before, which is exciting. And the other thing that I do remember, I think Joe mentioned it about brain injuries, and it's just amazing and fascinating that another part of the brain takes over what the damaged brain couldn't do. That blows my mind away. And I thought I read this, and I don't, somewhat related. I thought I read something about potentially that, I don't know if you'd say the brain is like, or memory in other parts of the body, that they're potentially saying that memory, that it may not even be just in the head, local to the head, that it potentially could be throughout your whole body in terms of memory. Now, I don't know if that's related to neuroplasticity per se, but that's another fascinating piece that I'm very interested in, see how that evolves as we learn more with various testing and fMRIs and stuff like that. So it's just a remarkable area of interest.
Absolutely. I deliberately pick topics which we have been interested in, that I know that everybody is interested in. So even when you have not watched a particular video, we've actually talked about this talk, every topic of the video that we are going to pick, we have thought about it, and we have, we have things to say about it. I'm going to give preference to people who have not spoken before. So we're going to start with Dave.
Thanks, Shrikant, and thanks for presenting, Joe. Yeah, I apologize, I didn't look ahead and see the videos, but I am somewhat familiar with this. Some of you are aware I work with people with PTSD, and of course, I've heard a kind of description that normally our senses bring information into our brain, and it's kind of sorted out in the different areas in our brain, like a filing cabinet. But when a traumatic event comes into our brain, it's stuck like a clump, and it's a obstruction in the brain. And so that's one way that neuroplasticity can work on that problem. And I think it was a meetup a week or two ago, talked about, the system 1, system 2, left brain, right brain thing. If you go for a walk, and especially if you're cognizant of this, you kind of think about left, right, walking down this street or whatever, and focusing your attention back and forth. That actually, because of the muscle control, it actually exercises your right brain and left brain. And I think the theory is it actually can start bypassing this blockage, and it may be a way for healing. And I think a lot of this brain stuff, we're just at the entry point in some of these discoveries. But, of course, there's stories, in one of the books I read about the brain, that a man's, that had a steel rod go through, his head, and lost about half of his brain, and completely changed his personality and his behavior. But over years, he returned back to normal again. So there is definitely evidence of these. Your brain can make changes and adapt for problems. So yeah, definitely an area for study. And as old people getting older, as someone was commenting, exercising our brains and keeping young is worth trying to do. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Next up is Laura. Laura, go ahead. Laura, you're on mute. Okay, let's go with Marco, and then we'll come back to Laura.
I'm off.
Go ahead, Laura.
I don't know if you want me to give a personal example.
No, let's not go too much into personal example. Let's keep first at this level, okay? Because I want people to be able to kind of think at this level. It's very
Okay,
difficult, right? And then we'll come to it maybe
how
later.
about I just talk about, I think that there's a real role between physical and mental. That there's
Perfect. Go ahead.
okay. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I'll be the poster child later.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Laura. Next
Okay.
up is Marco. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, from my readings on neuroplasticity, sorry, hopefully it's what I saw the video, but I sort of like breezed through it. But I think that basically the neuroplasticity, the brain has the potential to change. Like if you're sort of, stuck in a in like a sort of, from growing up, you're prone to like depression or anxiety, that sort of the brain has the potential to change. It's plastic and it's malleable. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great observation. See, like when you look at extreme cases like the one that Dave was talking about, you have something going through your brain and just damage a whole bunch of systems. And then you see how the brain reacts to even such a situation, right? I mean, the way I feel about it is I say, wow, this thing is capable of actually growing and rewiring on a scale which is like 100 times more than most people presume. And that's a really life-giving thought. You don't have to be stuck with whatever you have. That's like, the extreme situations that you see are people who kind of ran into a problem, ran into a wall, something hit them. But you don't have to wait for that in order to engage your full capability of doing, seeing what you can do with it. Next up is going to be Nari, followed by Joe. Nari.
I just wanted to say I love this topic. This is something that when I was doing my master's in ESL came up a lot, because it's neuroplasticity is really evident when you're learning another language. Like you have to make those connections, and like we espouse kind of repetition to kind of go towards automaticity, I think is what it is. So just repeat enough so that it becomes automatic in the response and you don't have to think about it. You just kind of bypass that filter. One thing I did want to kind of comment on is that sometimes we can get in the way of our own neuroplasticity and our own learning, because we'll become intimidated, especially with speaking another language. We'll become like fearful of, oh, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to come across as somebody who doesn't know anything, right? And so in that way, we kind of inhibit ourselves and our own growth. And so something else to kind of keep in mind.
No, I think that's a huge point, because I think that's one thing that I've learned, like most of the limitations are your own limitations. Like it's like internally set limitations. And then like when you live most of your life thinking, oh, I can't do this, I'm just like this. And then when you sometimes you kind of push through, mostly out of necessity or something that you don't have a choice, and then say, wait a minute, why did I think all this time that I couldn't? So absolutely, the internal limits. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, one thing I was actually going to mention that you were just talking about is this idea when it becomes necessary to push yourself into doing something that you wouldn't normally do. It could be a new job, or it could be, and the importance of that is it really is something that then you start to realize just how much else you can learn and how neuroplasticity actually works. But the other aspect of it is as well, and the negative aspect is that if you're in a negative environment where you're getting negative feedback, and that can have a detrimental impact. So when they're talking about environment, they're also talking about the people that are around you. There are toxic environments and toxic people that can prevent neuroplasticity. And so that's also worth noting, because that it's not just about you, it's also about being fortunate enough to be in the environment where you're actually able to thrive. So I think that that's an important part of this process.
No, that's a fantastic point. You made 2 points, which I thought were just great. One point is the issue of environment. It's not that you just decide, okay, I'm going to do it internally. It's just that you choose to place yourself in a challenging environment, in a new environment. And that is so you have to use the outside as the trigger, as something that you have to contend with as a stimulant for that. It's kind of like you're putting yourself in a new soil and see what nutrients you can get and where you can grow as a result of that. So I think that the role of environment is one. And the second one is about people. We are social beings, and people around us are part of our context. And they have impact on us for better and for worse. So environment, so that's one thing I like about this group, because there is a sense of kind of respect for each other, and that everybody is trying to learn, and everybody is trying to learn from other people. At the same time, they're very open in sharing what they know. So it's a very good environment to be learning. The last point I would make is the point that several people have made about this mind-body connection, that you can't really think of it as just the brain. I will do this. Actually moving, actually doing things is a crucial part of that feedback loop. So it's like feedback loop at 3 different levels. One is a biological feedback loop of your body. There is a social feedback loop, and it's also kind of psychological, emotional. And then there is the feedback loop of the environment itself. Next up is Jeff.
This is such a wonderful topic, and it is so core, really, I think, to so many of the things that we've talked about in with regard to change and learning. And I'll give you one little example that I had early on. I worked my way through college as a teaching tennis pro, and what I was able to do, because I had not learned how to do this as a young child, I learned how to hit topspin backhands.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't learn till I was about 14 or 15 years old. So I knew how to learn how to hit a topspin backhand. Like it just did, it didn't come to me as if I'd done it all my life. And that was something that I was able to do with people. But it was essential that in order to help them learn this, because it was a visceral, physical, mental, emotional reaction when the ball came to somebody's backhand side, no matter who they were, whether they were an athlete or not or whatever, that they would just, they'd cut it, they'd slice it. And hitting a topspin backhand was really, really hard for people. And so what I would do is, after giving them the first maybe 15, 20 minutes of a lesson, we'd go over and everybody would sign their name with their non-dominant hand.
Mm-hmm.
And they would see that the purpose of that was to show them that they could do it. They just didn't. And they never really, they hadn't done it before. And trying to hit a topspin backhand was going to be like that. It was going to be something you were going to have to choose to do, even though you were really lousy at it for a while. And gradually, as we would do nothing but that you'd build up the mind, body, emotion, timing, physical, responsiveness to be able to do it. And people were amazed that they could learn how to do it. It was almost as though it convinced them they could do something that was really, really hard, that they thought they might never be able to do. And that was very fulfilling for me, and actually led to a career of leadership training and all kinds of teaching and all kinds of things. And that was my first experience of doing it. But I think this idea that you have to disrupt something and commit to it if you really want to begin to have a shot at doing that rewiring, kind of like only allowing people to speak French in a class to learn French, that it really requires that kind of commitment and discipline to pull it off.
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic point. I want to connect it with the point that Nari was making. You at the end, you talked about language, the power of immersion. I mean, that's the simplest way of learning the language or learning anything. You just go to France and talk only French because you can't do anything else. And it's amazing how fast you can learn when you're in a context like that. So wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. I really like the story. So folks, if you want to share anything about neuroplasticity at this point, you can go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Let's talk more about language. Okay, learning of a new language, or something that I really struggle with, and that's pronunciation. I'm trying to read Dao De Jing, and I'm trying to pronounce it. It's so hard because you have to get the tones right, which is crucial to Chinese, and I'm not used to that. So, that's just one example. But what it does is that it's like when you practice something, you are actually bringing in a whole bunch of context along with it. These are all connected. The sounds, so any thoughts? So Nari, let's talk about neuroplasticity and language. So what is your experience about the learning language?
One of my big experiences is it's amazing how fast you can forget it. So I lived in Japan for 3 years, which really helped improve my Japanese, but I've been out of it for, close to 10 years now. And it's amazing. I'll meet a Japanese person and there's like your automatic responses, like what I was talking about before, automaticity. I've got those down. But then once we start delving into a more, just varying from what the same conversation form that we have before, and become much more individual and get into interesting conversations, I should say. That's when my language skills break down and I can really fill the gap of the 10 years and the not using it every day and not hearing all the words. It's sort of like the automatic response of vocabulary is so much slower. I mean, we suffer from it ourselves in our first language, like where there's, what is that word? It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember it. Only so much more worse as a second language.
Wonderful. Laura, you had something on Italian. Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I had to learn Italian. I was living in Italy. For some time, I thought I was going to move back to the States and not live there. But given circumstances of becoming ill and being uninsured, I decided I better learn the language. So I sat down with the book and I finally learned verbs. And once I learned the conditional tense, it changed my life completely because I was able to speak. And I was immersed in Italian language. I was with people who spoke Italian and I took great advantage of it. And when I went back, I was out of Rome that summer, but when I went back to Rome, I had my verbs and I started speaking a lot. And I really became I integrated myself and I spoke to every shopkeeper and I became friends with everybody. And I just had a whole new life, and it changed my whole sense of being there. I was still known as La Americana, but that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I could joke with people and that made a big difference when you can joke with people and, that it changes the entire experience. And the irony of all of this is I was having a cognitive test and you had to write every word you could think of, beginning with the letter F in 2 minutes. I wrote every word. Every word was in Italian. Second letter M, every word, and the third letter A. in all three cases. And the woman said, well, this shows that Italian is your primary language. And I started laughing hysterically because me, Italian, primary language. But in fact, it became my primary language. I still think in Italian now. I talk to my dog in Italian every day because that's her primary language as well. And anytime I hear Italian, I immediately rush to and start speaking in Italian. And in fact, one day I was on 57th Street anyway, the wind was really horrible that day. And it lifted up my walker and I tried to hold on to it. Anyway, I fell in the street. And normally people run to you, you used to, but nobody ran to me. And there I was like, help, help, and nobody could hear me. And the guy that was there to help me couldn't speak a word of English. And the next guy that came couldn't speak, but I heard he could speak Italian. So I started speaking Italian to him and he could talk to the other guy. So it paid off, But anyway, it's a really interesting process. It's hard though to learn a language when you're older. The pronunciations are harder. And people thought that I spoke better than I did because I spoke really fast. And that really, sometimes it works just to speak fast. I will say that. But you can't, fool some of the people some of the time. But anyway, you really do need to learn the language as fast as you can in order to live somewhere. But I still think you're considered a resident tourist all the lifetime because nobody really lets you in.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. I really liked all these observations. I want to say a couple of things, and then I'm going to have Nari ask you a question. So firstly, it's very interesting. You have an Italian-speaking dog that eats carrots. That's very odd. Second thing I want to say is that this is a power of learning something. If you learn the language, you can actually integrate with the culture. You can interface with the culture in a way which you cannot do otherwise. And what that does is that actually produces kind of new circuitry in the brain at a completely new level, because you're now interacting with ways in which people interface with each other. I have to tell you a story. I have to tell you guys a story of me in Italy. I spent like a week in Florence, and I would speak to people. And I like talking to people wherever I go. And so I would speak to people. They would not know English, and I would not know Italian. But Italians are very nice people. They actually are full kind of warm-hearted people. So they actually want to talk to you. So I know, and I like to use my hands somewhat, and they like to use their hands a lot. And so we could actually have a whole conversation with just few words going here and there that we would be able to match somehow and still get a lot done. So there is universal language, and there is kind of unique things that you can get from language. Nari, you had a question.
I did. So we have a saying in the second language sort of community in that, like, when you really started learning a language, when you can kind of dream in it. So Laura, did you dream in Italian, or do you still?
I still think in Italian, I have to say. I don't know if I dream in it because I don't know what language. I might have dreamt in Italian, if possible, but I do think in Italian quite a bit now. I mean, it sometimes pops in my head before English does. And I sort of like the idea that that's happening because I don't want to lose that. And I purposely try and think in Italian because I don't have enough ability to speak in Italian. I speak to people in Italy in Italian. I speak to my sister-in-law in Italian all the time. And, so that's good. I'm keeping it up. Wonderful. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So folks, this is again, another thing that I would strongly recommend, that if you have a language that you learned at one point, I think it's a good idea to use it. Like, for example, especially if you really got good in the language. Like, for example, I'm very good in Marathi, the language I grew up speaking, which I don't use much. But anytime I look at it, it's like my brain is reconnecting or kind of remembering all these connections which are there. And those are all there. Those are just not used much. and you can see, you can actually feel, I mean, I don't know whether I would say that, but you can actually see this thing of saying, oh, I did not know that so much richness was there and that I can express it with such, such facility. And it just comes back to you like that. So I think that's another way of saying that, you have these layers and layers built up, and you can go back and rework and reintegrate and start using kind of the older levels that you have built in you. And next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
I feel our brain got so billion, maybe 100 billion of neurons. They need connection, so we need to feed them. So from your language perspective, I remember I learned English in China. It's silent English. We don't have such environment. We only reading, writing, grammar. So that time, anything I read some English, I have to translate internally. Google, translate myself from English to Chinese words. So slowly here, I come back. I get used to it. That's why, if I maybe native speaker, maybe notice the words only okay. That's water is water. So I don't need to translate. It's the second point is yesterday we talked about how do you observe a dream or words or picture. It's like sometimes words, if let's say you dream some Italian, if you're English speaker, maybe you translate it to English or then go into a picture. That's amazing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Jean.
Yeah, about language, I have an interesting story to share. In China, they used to have translator for movies. So they make American movie or foreign movie, they have a few. So they talk in Chinese, but somehow you feel they're like foreigners speaking Chinese some way. And then there's some people speak English, like broadcasting. Then you feel they're like speaking, foreigners speaking Chinese. Anyway, the point I realized, the English become kind of like more familiar part of me is when I was at a church. I was like, oh, this guy's English so good. And then my friend told me he actually speaking English in Chinese. I said, what? So it's like somehow some American they speak English feels like Chinese because it's so clear. So it just very interesting. I want to share that the feeling somehow is different.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. Folks, if you have comments or at this point, let's open it up for questions also. You can go ahead and put some questions. Let me see what time it is. We are about, it's at about 10 o'clock. So let's start with questions. Okay. So what we are going to do is let's take questions in massive quantity. So let's, about neuroplasticity, what questions do you have? What are the big questions on your mind about neuroplasticity? So go ahead, whoever has questions, just let's list all the questions and then we'll try to have a discussion on all the questions that people bring up. So if you want to have discussion, just go ahead and type exclamation mark for your question and I'll call upon you. At this point, we are just stating the question. You can give a little bit of introduction if you want to make the question intelligible, but mostly questions. Jyoti, what's your question?
Yeah, my question is, as I said before, I enjoyed the talk about the neuroplasticity and I believe in it. And I think you can change your negative emotions, negative thoughts to positive thoughts and what have you. What happens if your neurotransmitters are faulty?
Okay.
Some people have serotonin deficiency or dopamine and their thought processes go haywire. What happens then?
Okay, excellent question. Neuroplasticity and neurotransmitters, problems with neurotransmitters. Okay, next up is Kevin, Joe, Laura, and Dave. Kevin, what's your question?
Yeah, follow on previous is about how do you identify this behavior or habit hurt my brain?
Okay, very good. So what practice of habits can hurt as opposed to help?
I would refrain this question because we already know something could hurt. It could be a double thought, maybe from a second question. For example, stress, sleep. It could lead to both ways. You not have enough sleep, you got hurt your brain. You got too much sleep, also not good. So how do you, that kind of scale those, good or bad for our brain?
Okay.
Thank you.
So good or bad, and how do you do that? Okay. All right. Next up is Joe. Joe, what's your question?
So I'll be interested to know if anybody really is familiar with the research of how technology actually impacts our brains. So she used an example of mapping, how there were taxi cab drivers that had to memorize the map of London had, developed part of their brain. And that's a very famous study versus bus drivers that were only driving specific routes. And that their, spatial relations were much more stronger. But what does that mean? So we're using GPS, we're using things that are impacting how, what we think about, and what's the impact of the technology with our minds.
Excellent. Excellent. Fantastic question. Next up is Laura. Laura, what's your question?
Okay, I sort of feel like when you talk about this plasticity, that you're almost looking at sort of like an executive level. And I want to look at the level under the sort of cognitive level of things now. So how does that, what happens if that level, something can't be fixed or something that's not.
So I will, sure. So what happens when the layer below that? So that's kind of very similar to Jyoti's question. So I'll go ahead and put it with that. Okay. Next up is going to be Dave. Dave, what's your question?
Yeah, I see advertisements on the TV from time to time about supplements that might help your brain, help your memory. Anyone have any experience with those type of things? Thank you.
Supplements. Okay. Anybody else wants to put any questions on the table? Last chance. All right. So what I want to do is I want to start with general questions first. Our capability of answering kind of specific questions that have to do with when things can go wrong in the brain. Our ability to answer that question is very poor to non-existent, because it's such a complex thing that to talk about it in this way, maybe you do more harm than good, because we don't know what you're really talking about when we're talking about how those things are there. So those questions I'm keeping aside, maybe we'll come to them last. I want to start with the question that Joe raised, because that's a very large question. And it goes to, in some ways, it connects with this entire issue of neuroplasticity itself. So in terms of how does technology shape your brain? My favorite example is this. Okay, the pen and paper and writing. I mean, that is the biggest example I know of how you can really shape your brain, because you're writing your thoughts, you're putting them down on paper, you're looking at them, being more self-reflective about it, being more organized about your thoughts, and you're manipulating your thoughts outside of yourself. So that's one big technology. The second technology that I want to talk about is speech and conversation. Conversation is also a technology that we are using right now. Why is this? What is this conversation doing? I mean, see, when I'm speaking, I'm using gestures. I'm using the tone of the voice. And that is carrying that is carried as an integral part of communication. It has kind of emotional impact. It has kind of, you're able to see patterns. So that entire technology of conversation, You can see, like, if you have not talked to somebody for a while and you have a really good conversation, it does you good. How is that? What is the mechanism of that? That too is a technology. It's a very primitive technology, very old technology, but very much of technology. What happens when you watch too much TV, when you're passive and you get used to being passive? What happens when you are used to searching for anything that you want to search for and do that in an aggressive way so you can learn as much as possible? What happens to your brain with that? So these are some of the examples, just few examples. What happens when you use the technology of a chair and you sit most of the time instead of walking around? What happens to you? What happens to you, your body, and what happens to your brain as a result of that? Walking is natural. It energizes, it gives you the supply of oxygen. The movement is natural, brain flourishes in that. Aristotle had this peripatetic school where they walked around and talked. That's how they did philosophy. So these are some of the kind of technologies that I can think of. So folks, that's the question on the table. How does technology impact your neuroplasticity in positive or negative directions? So that's the question on the table. Anybody who wants to take a stab at it can go ahead and type ! Jyoti next. Jyoti.
Yeah, actually, I read in the AARP magazine for the seniors, people of my age, they actually recommend use of technology. And they said that Googling, looking for the information, scanning, it improves the eye-hand coordination, and the messages that go in the brain by searching, they stick in the brain longer than some other mechanisms. So technology has been recommended for the older people.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Nari?
I'm going to stick to education. I feel like such a parent, but something that I really mourn is our what is the word I'm looking for? Dependence on technology. So kids nowadays are given calculators and are able to do like simple math equations. So they no longer know like their times tables. And granted, I could only do like 12 times 12, up to 12 times 12. But still, like if I'm in a store and I need to do like quick math, I can do it really quick. Whereas I'm finding that some of the younger generation, they're like, oh, I don't know. They have to bring out their calculator on their phone in order to do that. And I think that in that way, it kind of hinders us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next up is going to be Joel, followed by Kevin and Marco. Joel.
Thanks, Shrikant. I just have one comment following on Dave's question about supplements.
No. We are talking only about technology right now. We will come to all the other questions later on. We're going
sorry. Sorry.
Well, what do you think about technology, Joel? Are you for technology or against it?
Well, obviously I'm for it. I'm not sure I exist outside of technology.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Joel. Next up is Marco, Laura, and Joe. Marco.
Yeah, definitely. Like with the whole, like having a conversation with a friend, like Google, like doing like a Google search, like that's kind of like, it's lucky that we have that like that technology, but like it's, we're not using our brains like to, carry that information with us around.
Thank you. Next up is Laura. Laura, what do you think about technology? Oh, I forgot about Kevin. Okay, Kevin, thank you, Nari, for pointing out. So it's going to be Kevin followed by Laura. Kevin.
Okay, thank you. For me, I need to consider, but let's see, talk about the mapping itself. Like old days, we walk where we only based on memory. Later, we got a mapping book driving around. We can point out that make the map inside our memory or draw the paper. Slowly, GPS map. I would say that's not good for our brain. Or you can see this way, our outsource our memory to the external, for example, GPS or other devices. Are smart based on devices, not ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I do have a comment on the externalization of memory, but I'll hold off until everybody has talked about it. It's a very interesting topic. Laura followed by Joe. Laura.
I'm sort of against cell phone technology. I think it's really been a negative aspect as it's entered the younger generation. The language that they speak, with text language has become part of their language, and it's really bad. And teachers find it. There's lack of the communication skills are worse, and they can't do face-to-face the way they could before. Not that it was great, but there's a lack there. Their learning ability to write has been impacted by it. I think we need to go back sometime to, one-on-one 3D kind of conversation that is lacking because of it. There's also just the sense of immediacy with it. Oh, I got a message, I got a text, I got to answer it right now. Like, why? There's absolutely no reason for it. But now we have created that sense and there's just this expectancy that everything goes like this, and it shouldn't be that way. We should learn that things take process. There's a process sometimes that may be ongoing, which I think they don't have at all because of it. And also because of, using the computer and all that. That part of it, I think sometimes is good, but I think sometimes it's bad because they don't have to investigate. And I think we're not teaching them well on the use of the computer. And
Thank you.
so forth. That's all my commentary.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe.
I think it has a huge impact on how our neuroplasticity. Specifically, if you think of some of the behaviors aspects of it, if behavior is a major contributor to our neuroplasticity, you can even think of how we interact with people, the stress that it causes individuals, and if even the idea of instant gratification, as Laura was referring to, one of the things that she mentions in the video is that there's a lot of value to be had in struggle, and that these tools that we have, we don't necessarily struggle like we used to. So think about spelling and autocorrect, and that you automatically have something, that you don't have to look up the word anymore. You used to have to look up the word, think about the word, copy it back down on a piece of paper, and that actually impacts how you think. And then you may learn something else in that process, but it forces you to get out of side of just having something that's going to automatically do it for you. I think that I think it can have a positive impact, though. It's not all negative. I think it can have a really good impact when it comes to language, because the idea that you're hearing the words or that you're interacting with a machine, I think in that case, in that particular instance, I mean, yes, you could have recordings and listen to things in the past, but I think it's a little bit more accessible. And the idea of, you can learn a new language online a lot easier, which is part of your neuroplasticity and one of those things that we've discussed here this evening. I think that that's something that it can be in a positive way. So I think it has this it's how you use it and how you engage with it ultimately. And I think that that we need to be mindful, because our desires are to have immediate answers and immediate gratifications. So if you really want to develop your spelling skills with something like that, don't use spell check and look up the word and go through that process, and you will develop other skills in that in that works, other brain functions within that. So that's my opinion. It depends on how you engage with it. But I think this gets to the whole question of the meetup. How do you engage with how would you manage your own neuroplasticity? And essentially technology is one of those ways that we can actually control.
Joe, that was fantastic. That was just fantastic. So I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it's a question of how you use it. What happens is that each of the technology by its nature kind of, I like the way in which McLuhan talks about it. He says that it enhances or extends one of your senses. It extends something, it enhances something. Now, the core thing is to realize that each of these technologies is going to enhance different things. And if it is, there is a nature, I mean, the real deep inside of McLuhan is that there is a nature to human beings. If you extend like one of your arms, like 30 feet, then that's going to throw you off kilter. So any particular kind of thing that you do too much of, that is going to hurt you in some way. So you kind of have to figure out, firstly, the nature of each of the technologies. So let's very briefly go through like the major technologies, right? So there is the technology of oral communication. Let's take even before that. This is, Merlin Donald, mimetic, so it's performance. So we are all performers first. We talk to each other. There is physical movement. There is a story. So there is a performance aspect of the technology. The second aspect is words. Words have tremendous power, and they sit on the top of the performance. Then you have the writing, which gives you a distance. It is a much more, it's a way of thinking more long-term than you possibly can in just speaking. Now, of course, each of these technologies comes back and shapes the previous one. So what I'm saying now is conditioned by the fact that I read and write. I would be speaking differently if I did not read and write. So the orality is kind of shaped by that. Then you go to the next level, which is printing, which is what printing does is that there is a widespread availability of works that other people have written that you can plug into your head. I mean, it's an incredible technology. You can, otherwise, how would you do that? You actually had to meet these people, and you couldn't travel much. So you had just a bunch of people around you, and you didn't have, so writing gives you, it's like being more self-reflective. What printing gives you is that it gives you an access to everybody. Again, each of these, suppose you were to just read and not write much, your head would be full of unintegrated ideas that you're not able to put together. So there is a connection between that. And then you go to the next level where you have technologies like telegraph. You have technologies like the radio. You have technologies like the TV, which are kind of more broadcast. They are more, like, for example, TV is too passive. You're taking in stuff and you're not doing anything. And it's very powerful because it engages all your senses. And it captivates you, and it takes you on an emotional ride based on somebody else's imagination, not your own. So you're kind of passively being led around. Then you have got the computer. Now, computer is really remarkable because it actually brings together all these technologies. You can choose how much reading you do, how much TV you watch on your computer, how much do you actually talk, have a conversation. All of it is being enabled by the computer. So in that sense, it's kind of a more meta technology. It's much more powerful because it integrates everything. I mean, I have to correct myself. All previous technologies actually do that. In TV, that brings in orality, it brings in written in some format. So there is that. So all of this, and you get to choose what you do. I think Joe, you put it really beautifully. You said it's mindfulness. Are you mindful about how you're using the technology? And you always have a choice. If you think TV is doing damage to you, shut it off, throw it away. If it's your phone which is causing you trouble, put it on silent, turn it off, for periods of time. So you control how you use it, and not let technology kind of passively, just you don't react to technology. You kind of use it in a proactive way. Next up is going to be Dave and Patricia. And Donna, if you're up for reading what you've put in the chat, that would be fantastic, because that's very, because many people do not read chat. So it's going to be Dave, Patricia, and Donna. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. Yeah, technology, yeah, the smartphone, I call it my smart aleck phone sometimes, yeah, is taking over for us. And like the language we've been talking about, I think I can probably find an app that will translate for me. And I think a lot of people dictate into their phones. They talk on their phone and it automatically types. And it's amazing to me now, but because we write so little that they don't even teach young people cursive writing in school anymore. It's amazing to me. And the thing of it is, I'm learning more and more to use my Alexa, what time is it, or set the 10-minute timer. And of course I use GPS in my car because that's the only way I can ever find my way around Seattle. But the thing of it is, we got the option to do other things. As you said, make choices. I watch TV, but last night on public TV, I watched a wonderful documentary on Ernest Hemingway. And gosh, I go to here to 52 living ideas to stimulate my little brain. So I think we all have to find other things, find new ways to stimulate our brains. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is going to be Patricia. Patricia.
Yes, I can talk about this for hours, but because I work in an elementary school with children with disabilities. So I'm seeing daily the effects of digital technology on their learning and their interactions. And I also went to a 2-day workshop last week on autism. And there were about 6 presenters. And I have a whole manual from one of the presentations that's totally about screen time. And it presents a lot of different research studies about the impact of screen time on reading skills, writing skills, oral language skills, empathy skills, and overwhelmingly they're negative. At the same time, I think that for me, what I'm seeing is for some of my students with disabilities, these things like voice typing, text to speech, speech to text, they're game changers. These kids are dyslexic. They cannot read, they cannot write. That does not mean they do not have a lot of knowledge in their heads. I just did an online search today with a kid, and he showed me the car he just bought with his dad, and he's telling me all about the interior and the exterior and the color choices. And if I had asked him to write down what color is your dad's car and it's gray, he would have never been able to do that. But by being able to verbally say to his computer, look up the Acura RDX in gray, he was able to bring me up a picture and show me, and then give me a little tour of the thing. So I think we really need to be, I think mindfulness and discernment are key in how we're learning, how we're using it as adults, and how we're showing children how to use it, because it's there and they're using it daily. And it, again, things can be done for the good and things can be done for the bad. And we need to make sure we're balancing it. So that's a little bit of my thought on it.
Wonderful. Patricia, that was great observation. And I think that's a great point, because it's like, it's always a double-edged sword. I mean, it is a sword, it is a tool. And I think the way in which, again, McLuhan has thought really well, I really like his thoughts about it. He says that nothing is written, in the sense that, like, technology is not going to shape you unless you let it. So you have to, so instead of just reacting to technology and accepting whatever impact it has on you, you choose how and what technology, how much and how you engage it, and in what combination. You say, okay, after doing this, you need to do that. So there are many ways in which, but it's all, I think, comes down to firstly by being mindful of the effects of technology, saying, what is this doing to me? Okay, what does writing do to me? What does reading do to me? What does listening to people do to me? What does speaking do to me? What does watching TV do to me? On computer, what happens when I do this? Computer, what happens when I do that? And observe that. And that's the starting point of being kind of aware of what I think most people are not aware. They're just doing things habitually. Also, there are people whose motivation is like, for example, Facebook makes money if you are completely engaged in that. So that it is going to do things to you, which is going to increase your screen time in that. And that means that it's going to give you something that hits your emotions, positive emotions and negative emotions in a big way. So there is also not just the technology, but the entire system behind the technology that is shaping things. And you have to understand that too. You have to be aware of that and then make conscious choices. Say, what are you trying to get out of life? And how is this going to what combination of technologies should you be using? Go ahead, Patricia.
I just wanted to say, I'm going to send you, Shrikant, a very funny little clip from one of the sessions I attended. And it goes from Socrates to 2030, when a child is looking at the phone saying, hey, Siri, what is 2 + 2?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. Looking forward to that. Next up is Mike. Mike, what do you think about technology and neuroplasticity? Mike?
Yeah, I had trouble. I had trouble with technology and getting the system's attention. I got too many things running in the background. A couple things about technology. The entire story we've been studying about Julian Jaynes is all about neuroplasticity and how the mind developed new functions very quickly because of the need of commerce and agriculture, and how language developed is really a neurotechnology story. There's an interesting story about Helen Keller, who was born deaf, dumb, and blind. And she was about 7 years old when she got a tutor who basically taught her how to speak in Braille, how to communicate in Braille. And she eventually graduated college and wrote several books and became somewhat a genius. She said before she learned language, which was a neuroplasticity story, she did not know that she was alive. She did not really know that she was alive. And that's an interesting concept. The movie we talked about, the notation was funded and driven by trying to learn more about how strokes work for neurotechnology. Now, there's a lot of technology which the movie didn't go into, but which the young lady herself went into, and many other people in technology, from fMRI, which Sanjay was talking about, to various drugs that do influence neuroplasticity. The fluoxetine derivatives and catecholaminergic derivatives which are dangerous to use in a non-clinical setting, help that neurotechnology.
Thank you.
A couple more things that I might add. computer-brain interfaces are under a pretty high level of development right now, and they involve neuroplasticity. Somebody who has the cochlear implant, the artificial ear, operates by putting little thread wires inside your brain and putting audio stimuluses into. They don't know exactly where to put them, but when you start delivering electrical stimuluses of sound into the brain at approximate points, you can be trained to interpret those things as sound. So someone who was totally deaf, and that was, there's some famous people have had these things because they're not cheap right now. And they've learned how to interpret speech through neuroplasticity that they talk about in the future that may allow vision for totally blind people.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank
You
you,
want
Mike.
a couple more things?
No, let's
Or you've had enough. I was going to tell you about prostheses that like artificial hands and artificial legs. Okay,
yeah,
but that's
it's
for
amazing.
another day.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah. Well, thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. I always like the range of your observations. I just have to make sure that it remains, on track. And today you were just very, very good. Thank you. So next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, really quickly, one of the things that Dr. Boyd talks about is the idea of how interventions can be, specifically targeted. And an interesting point that Patricia had already brought up, and I had actually just had a conversation about this previously before this meetup, was specific to the idea of autism and kids that have autism and or even have other learning disorders, that they use technology as a way of facilitating their ability to even communicate. But they also have a relationship with the machine itself in certain cases, where they don't feel like the machine is judging them. So the behavioral impact is very positive, and in the sense that whereas with people that are don't have disorders, that the way they interact with machines, it actually inhibits, maybe in some ways, the way they interact with other people. So it shows you how personalized technology can actually really help people based on their specific condition. And these are, specific circumstances. So like there's examples, and I'm sure Patricia knows about the Kurzweil types of technologies that have allowed people to essentially be able to hear and process information much more efficiently. I think those are absolutely amazing technologies, and will benefit people that have disabilities going forward immensely. But it's amazing that people that are traditional learners, it may have some of these tools, not necessarily, it may actually not necessarily the learning tools, but the other handheld devices will have negative impacts on their behavior. So it just shows you how specific interventions are important based on your needs.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to make two comments about what Mike said. So firstly, the Helen Keller story is very interesting. And there is a fantastic book called The Miracle Worker. It's a play, and it's a great play. And it's basically kind of almost like a detective story of an epistemologist or something like that, of how does a mind come alive. And it's just incredible story. So I would definitely recommend that. Secondly, Mike was talking about Julian Jaynes, and language is technology, and language, both oral and especially written language, the impact that it has had on the brain is probably greater than all these other technologies. So, that's why I'm a big fan of writing, reading too, but writing especially. So I recommend that very well. So it's not just, when you think of technologies, don't think of just what people call technology. Technology is a much broader concept. So Laura, very brief comment, and then we're going to go to the next question. Go ahead. You're on mute.
Okay. No, my brief comment was that, I've been having to engage in some things, and nobody has ever mentioned to me using any of these technologies to deal with any of my problems that have to do with neuroplasticity. So I don't know. Are these things that are only used with younger people, younger learners? And what is it not good for adults? I mean, I don't understand why the therapies that they were providing for me had nothing to do with this.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Next question, let's take the question from Kevin. So I'm going to try to say it, and then Kevin, go ahead and correct me. We want to get the question right. I mean, we're talking about kind of positive and negative impact of practice, of building habits. So the way, so question is, when does it hurt and when does it help? And what is the line between that? So Kevin, is that a reasonable way of asking your question, or do you want to put it in another way?
Yeah, how can we know? It's, for me, let's refer technology sometimes like a drug. It can cure you, also can kill you.
Okay, very good, very good. So when does technology cure you and when does the technology kill you? When does the effect of the technology is good and when is the effect of technology bad? And how do you tell the difference? So that's the question. So go ahead, folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark so you can answer that question. Linda.
I think that we need to measure how much we're using any one of these technologies. I think all technologies have the potential to hurt or to benefit. For example, what we're talking about, computers. A computer can be wonderful and it will open a world to us of knowledge. But if all we do is sit at the computer and never make any attempt to learn any other way, same with a phone. Wonderful to be able to talk to people around the world, but it's damaging if also some young people, I suspect, spend most of their day on the phone, texting and probably texting things that are not that relevant. We're responsible. We need to know if any technology is becoming the center of our lives. And we need to learn to use all technologies wisely. It's up to each one of us. I don't think that we can tell someone else how to use the technology. We need to measure how we're using it.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Linda. Next up is Donna, followed by Nari. Donna.
So to answer the question, I did find something from Scientific American from 2018 that states that research shows that by constantly distracting us, the internet affects cognitive performance, but does not radically alter our brains. That was one thing. And that makes sense to me, that I'm not sure that technology can drastically change our brains. And the reason I'm just going on my kind of thoughts here,
please,
that the brain is so adaptive and resilient that it's just gonna I don't think it will change it drastically because it's adaptive and resilient. It will go with the flow, I guess, if you will. And as it says, it can distract you. And then further reading talks about gaming. So if you, or the brain training products. So you've heard of how you can train your brain with these different games online. The thing with that is going to make you better at what you're training on, but they're saying the transfer of that growth of the brain, I guess, if you will, is weak. So, and I think that's why, say someone just is playing video games, they do say that there is a risk for aggressive behavior, but maybe that's just in the game, because again, it's kind of, the transfer is weak. I you know, what they're saying, so I'm just kind of taking these thoughts further than what they're saying. So I think technology is there and you can get caught up in it, but I don't think per se that it is destructive or enhancive. It's more individual what they do with that technology.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. And McLuhan has a very interesting way of looking at it. He calls it the tetrad. And what he's saying is that each technology enhances something. It gives you something. It displaces something. So it kind of gets rid of something. It also actually retrieves something. So it is bringing back something that was valuable that you have lost. And it also has this effect of, you know, when overused, it's going to flip and start hurting you. So all those four things are, you know, he looks at every technology from these four angles. What is it enhancing? What is it displacing? What is it retrieving? And fourthly, what is it flipping, or what does it flip into when you use it too much? Next up is going to be Nari and Linda. Nari.
I want to say that I think this is all really good discussions. I think we also need to kind of consider outliers, like people who can't necessarily control so people who are kind of addicted to the technology, because I think it has been shown to be addictive in some cases. Like it fires off those dopamine or those serotonin impulses in us that people want. And that, I mean, that's why we use it so much. So if a message comes in, oh, there's that serotonin flash of, oh, so-and-so wants to communicate with me. You know, I'm so happy I got a message. And so we're constantly seeking those out. And that's why we make ourselves so available. And for people who are, but it can go into the extreme where people are constantly seeking that, right? They're constantly seeking that serotonin rush, and they can't kind of walk away from it as easily as other people. So it's well and good to say, oh well, you know, we should moderate ourselves. Some people can't, and I think that that should be part of the discussion as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Maybe, you know, instead of just looking at technology and its characteristics, you have to look at kind of the systems, the human systems, emotional systems, hormone systems, physical systems, of like bodily systems that we are interacting with. You know, simple thing like what happens when you look down like this all the time? What happens to your neck? What happens to your entire posture? What happens to your mood? What happens to, so there's like just so many things. And what happens when, as you're saying, you know, different kinds of chemicals that are released by what you're doing. So you have to look at it as a whole system. Wonderful. So next up is going to be Linda, I think Kate, and then Joe. Linda.
Donna raised a very important issue. Some young people have become addicted to the games on computers, and that's been studied, and it's been very destructive. I think there's there's a facility that I think it's in California that opened a few years ago to deal with the addiction to the games. That, you know, you want to talk about what can be a negative. That can be a very destructive negative, that some people will sit at the computer and play those games throughout the day. Very destructive.
Thank you, Linda. Kate, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it was kind of rhetorical, but when you were saying before, you know, about examining what is happening from 4 different vantage points, I'm just wondering if we're even able to understand that or predict it. I mean, to some extent, yeah, but I mean, who could have predicted a lot of the things that have happened? Sorry, I was on the exercise machine, I can't breathe. Yeah, like with, you know, the polarization that we see right now. I mean, who would have predicted that the internet would allow anybody, just the average Joe, to, you know, have their own massive following, and they can say whatever crazy stuff they want. And, you know, you have people on different sides of the spectrum, and we end up with what we have today.
No,
In
it
terms
is.
of the media and the polarization and a million other things, like the Arab Spring and, you know, all kinds of things that just kind of metastasized out of. I mean, I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying, you know, a lot of things that we couldn't predict have emerged from technology and the internet.
Absolutely. It's a great point. And so part of it is that you kind of look at least you can look at in the past and see what the technologies did. You know, what did printing press do for society? How did it change? How did the fact that countries was tied together by a radio where people could hear a person's voice throughout the land, what did it do? What did television do? And it produces definitely unusual effects, and it makes things possible which was not possible. At the same time, many of the patterns that you see are like different versions of the same pattern. So it's like tribalism, for example, which has been there for a long time. It just allows for tribalism at a much larger scale. If there are people who want to learn, they're able to learn at a many, you know, it just kind of enables things. And what it is bringing back is some things many times are age-old things that human beings have had for a long time. It's just kind of, the shapes of it are different. And it is definitely very difficult to predict looking forward. Next up is it's the Uncommon Joe. Uncommon Joe, go ahead.
So, which one's that?
Joe, go ahead. You, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. The common Joe thinks this, so
okay.
just wanted
So
to make sure
thank
that we were talking about you.
I thought there was another person in the room that had to do with that name. I was like, okay. So the way I would look at it and the way I would evaluate it, specifically Kevin's question, is like any other addiction. When you have the inability to stop, or, you know, to engage with the technology, or whatever it may be, if you're talking about neuroplasticity, something changes your appetite, the way you sleep, the way you eat, your mood. You know, these are signs of that something is out of balance. Or when you're engaging in risky behavior, these are signs of addiction of any sort. And that does impact the plasticity of your brain, because that is your behavior that's actually now completely out of balance. What I really found to be extremely interesting was the idea of McLuhan's. And I thought about it, if something is being displaced and you don't even notice what has been displaced, I think that says that you're so far out of balance that you may be actually doing damage to yourself. So that you can, and it serves as a model that actually, you know, can tell you or send a signal of sorts that you know, when you're actually doing damage to your mind versus actually living a healthy, because this is also about being holistic, it's, you know, when you say behavior is a very broad term. You know, it's not just with technology, it's overall behavior. And I think if you look at traditional addiction markers, then anytime that you're out of balance, that's going to tell you whether you're impacting your mind.
Mhm. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We talk about a video game, definitely. Let's one simple, share one example. Let's say when you play game, you can stop any time. Either stop game, quit, you don't say goodbye, no gesture. When you interact with other people on a meeting, so it's not nice. Especially on dinner table, we just finished, leave there. However, you see this behavior is so common now. And the second one, it's how about even deeper? Do we need to consider how do we identify we as a human being? What's the minimum, the traits we have? I see from the speech language lane to the print to until now technology. Everybody have a device. It's other than video game with reading. We can read the whole night, 24 hours. We can Facebook, Twitter, all the good stuff. It's so attractive. So where's boundary? Our brain itself don't have the safety net, firewall. So that's what's the best recommendation for human being as baseline is starting then individualized, personalized. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I want to just follow up on this as a closing question. Just very, very quick answers. Okay. How do you plan? What's your strategy for using your neuroplasticity? What will you do? You can talk about a use of technology, or technology is just one of the questions we looked at, but the question is about neuroplasticity. What is your strategy for increasing your neuroplasticity? Just very, very quick questions, very, very quick answers, less than a minute. Joe.
Focus around being around healthy people would be one. That, you know, provide, you know, for a healthy environment. But I think there's a physical aspect of it, even just doing things like I've been doing little things like dribbling a basketball, like with my left hand, which I'm right-handed, just, you know, during the day, just to do these little actions to keep my mind, you know, active, and to honestly just more or less physically get more active. The other is to do things that are outside my comfort zone, period. Some of them are presenting. All right, so
You're getting
anyway.
more and more comfortable doing this. You know, it's like
it'll happen at some point.
Yeah, no, like, today was very good. You were very relaxed, and it was just great. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Kevin, and Laura. Jyoti, what's your strategy?
I have an inner drive that keeps me going in my life. I want to maintain that. I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm on the right track right now. I'm very physical, very cognitive, very mental, thanks to 52 ideas. That's one of the things that fell in my lap, and I want to maintain that. And just be very together. You know, I got my act together with whatever I had gone on for 8 years. It's over and done with. And I just want to maintain a healthy life. And I think I'll be able to preserve myself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jyoti. Kevin, what's your strategy for building your neuroplasticity?
Keep what you have, enjoy the moment, and be curiosity. Most likely, nothing is permanent. It's temporary. What do you see? Maybe not extra what you get. Words behind the meaning matters, and the picture possible is faked. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So it's going to be Laura followed by Patricia. Laura, what is your strategy for using and building your neuroplasticity? Laura, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, 52 learning. This has been quite an interesting process for me. My goal here is basically to try and use my notebook to be able to write, think, organize, do all of that, which I have yet been able to do. So that's my very biggest challenge, but I am going to do it. I mean, I swear I'm going to get it done at some point. So that's one of my main goals. A secondary goal is just to get organize my life so that I can accomplish something, at least a task a day, because somehow, no matter how many times I write tasks down, I get distracted and I wind up never being able to get more than one thing done. And it's usually the most trivial one. So I've got to work on that aspect of my elasticity. I have so many things I have to do. You know, it's true. It goes, the brain and the body, it's all tied, because when I'm physically not feeling well, my brain power goes down, my memory gets worse, I get more discombobulated. When I start getting back physically, my brain starts to get in gear and they work better together. And the problem is every time it gets going well, something knocks me down and I have to go down and back up again. It's a sine curve if I ever saw one. And I, you know, that's the nature. And I have dementia, but it's not, it's just that kind, and it goes up and down, and it's not the kind that'll get worse. And, you know, it's just, and it's a nasty game, and I don't know how to get out of it. I wish somebody would tell me some way which I could get on a more, you know, even path, you know, even slow upward, incline, you know, to get somewhere. I wish I could use some of these tools that people are talking about, you know, to help me. But, you know, when I talk to people in my cognitive therapy, it's just I would do these little things, you know, that don't seem to have any major impact, but I guess maybe over time they will. But I would like something that would just give me a jolt, you know, and send me off. Because this is 10 years now I've been mucking around with all of this. And
well, I would say that, yeah, I would say that in spite of all of that, you have the kind of the gumption and the courage and the determination to kind of keep going and keep building. So that's quite amazing, given the situation. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Patricia and Dave. Patricia, what is your strategy?
My strategy: daily exercise, daily meditation, daily gratitude journaling. I'm learning the ukulele and 52 living ideas. So thank you all as part of my gratitude for today.
Wonderful. Thank you. And our gratitude to you too. Thank you. And your observations today were fantastic, because you brought in all your experience with teaching and working on all these issues. So thank you. Next up is Dave. Dave, what's your strategy?
Yeah, I'll agree with Joe to get the exercise. And the nice thing, the weather is moderating. It's nice to go out and walk on the outside and get some fresh air. And also to eat healthy, because the brain is part of your body. So it's good to be healthy and have a good life, whole life. Thank you. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. I think these meetups are working really well. These are, you know, tremendously interactive meetups. We're doing, this week we are doing 3 of them. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about comprehensivism or polymathy. You know, how do you develop your polymathy? You know, what has been your inspirations? What have been your insights? And it's, again, going to be very interactive. And then on Friday, we are going to be talking about, inspired by Dave, by the way, we're going to read from our favorite books, self-help books that have helped us transform our lives. You get 5 minutes, because what happens is that when you actually read an author, their kind of style of the soul, their way of thinking is explicated in that. So, so bring your favorite book and read to us selections which will inspire people to go out and get it and start reading it. All right. So no, not tomorrow. It's on Wednesday. The polymathy is on Wednesday, Donna. That's right. Thanks for correction. Tomorrow, no meetup. I have a conflict. So folks, thank you very much. And Joe, that was fantastic. I think we are on to something. This is a great new format. And Joe, thank you again for doing the introductions. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
for the opportunity.